Hi everyone, it's Alice, and today I thought we could do a little mid-year check-in and talk about my favorite books that I've read this year so far. A lot of people on BookTube do these kinds of videos, and I really enjoy watching them because it's just fun to hear people talk about their favorite books. And sometimes not everything makes it into like the yearly favorites, so it's just fun to have like a mid-year check-in. And every year I think to myself, gotta remember to do that, and almost every year I forget. But this year I did remember, so here we are. I feel like I've had a pretty good reading year so far. I've read some really good books, so this list is like a mix of 4 and 5 star reads, and I don't know if all of them are gonna make it into like my yearly favorites, but it will be interesting to see. I haven't really put these in any particular order. I've just sort of tried to bunch them together by genre ish, and we're just gonna go through them. The first two I have are both mystery novels, and I really enjoyed both of these, even though they have very different vibes. The first one is The Impossible Fortune by Richard Osman, which is the 5th book in the Thursday Murder Club series, which is one of my favorite series, so it's no surprise that I really enjoyed this one. We're pretty deep in the series now, so I'm not going to go into this too much, but in these books we follow 4 pensioners who live together in, well, they don't live together in the same house, but they live in the same retirement village, and they are a part of a mystery murder club, I guess. And in the first book, it starts off with them meeting every Thursday to look at unsolved crimes, but in each book, they basically get involved in some sort of mystery, usually including a murder, and the way that they get involved is that they get themselves involved, even though they're not invited, which is kind of funny. And in this book, the case is all about this uncrackable code, and one of the people in this group are approached at a wedding. So it starts off at a wedding, and it's just a whole thing. It's kind of complicated. I always enjoy these books because they're just fun, and now I'm so far into the series that I feel like whenever I read these books, it feels like I'm visiting old friends, which is really nice. I also just really like the different mysteries in each of the books. I think they're really clever, but I also enjoy this, like, there is other stuff that happens with the characters across all of the books, and following their different stories I have really enjoyed. I was especially interested in what was going to happen to some of the characters in this book, because the 4th book, there's something that happens in that was kind of big. So it was interesting to see that as well. And these books are like on the cozy mystery side of things, and they're just very entertaining and super enjoyable, and I just always have such a good time when I'm reading them. The other one has a much like darker vibe to it. It's Faithful Place by Tana French, which is also a book in a series. This is the 3rd book in the Dublin Murder Squad series, but these books don't follow the same characters in each book, so it follows, like, the sequels follow side characters that we meet in the previous books. So in the first book, everything was all new, obviously, and all of the characters were new. But in the second book, we follow a side character that we meet in the first book. And in this book, the 3rd one, we follow a side character from the second book. I probably don't need to explain that, I'm sure you get it. I was very excited to pick this book up though, because when we meet this main character as a side character in the previous book, I was very curious about him. He is a seasoned undercover detective, and he grew up in this poor neighborhood in Dublin. And the story is about how when he was young, he had this girlfriend, and he was supposed to run away with her. They were supposed to go to England together and start a new life. And on the night when they were supposed to go, she didn't show. And he figures that she just went alone because she didn't want to be with him. But then 22 years later, her suitcase is found in that neighborhood that he's from. And obviously that raises some questions about what actually happened to her. So the main character goes back into this life that he's basically left behind, and the whole setting of this street and all of the people living on it and his family, it's very chaotic, but it's also super atmospheric, and I really enjoyed that. I also really liked reading about the main character. I think he's quite interesting, but there are also a lot of interesting side characters in here. And even though the story is about this mystery about what happened to this girl, it is also about all of these different relationships and these different, like, dynamics. And so it does feel like a very character-driven novel, which is probably one of the reasons that I enjoyed it so much. And I feel like this lives in that, like, literary mystery kind of world. Like, that's the kind of mystery book this is. I will say though, I think about this book more than I thought I would when I finished it. I didn't think it would stick in my mind the way that it has, but there is something about the way this author writes where, like, her books always stick with me. I don't really know what it is, but whatever it is, it's working for me. Then I have a couple of adventure books, and again, one is like much more on the lighter side of things and the other is much darker, which I do feel like sums up my reading taste quite well. The one on the lighter, cozier side of things is Brigands and Breadknives by Travis Baldree. This is the sequel to Legends and Lattes, and in this book we follow a side character that we meet in the prequel. The story follows a Ratkin bookseller who moves to the same town that the orc does in the first book, and she goes there to open up a new bookshop, and she feels like this will be like a new start for her. But then she does that and it doesn't have like the invigorating effect that she had hoped for. So she's kind of at a loss and she feels lost. And one night she ends up getting really drunk in her despair and she falls asleep in a cart. And when she wakes up, that cart is moving away from the town. And it's pretty far away actually. So she sort of accidentally goes on an adventure with some really interesting characters. I loved Legends and Lattes, and I know not everyone liked this as much, but I actually really loved it. I think one of the reasons this didn't work for everyone is that even though it is cozy, the pace is significantly different than in Legends and Lattes because there is more of like this adventure element to it, which is actually the reason why it worked so well for me. Like, that's one of the reasons that I loved it so much. And I just loved following the characters. I especially loved the main character. And I really enjoyed seeing this world get expanded a little bit. Like, we get to see different parts of it, and I really enjoyed that. And I just had a great time reading this. It was so much fun. And it was like cozy, but also adventurous. I kind of hope this author keeps writing more of these kinds of books in the series where we follow different characters and we get to see more of the world, because I really enjoyed that in here and I think that it would be a lot of fun to read even more. The other adventure book that I read is significantly more violent and brutal, and it has a totally different vibe, but I actually really enjoyed this one. It's The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This is a blend of adventure, fantasy, horror, and historical fiction, and it's set in a sort of alternate version of Europe, I guess, and in here we meet this monk who has been summoned to the sacred city, and he is very excited because he feels like he's gonna get this grand and holy assignment. But then he gets there and it turns out that he is going to be in charge of this group of criminals, and they are tasked with moving a princess basically from where they are to where she's originally from, and that is not going to be easy. The group consists of all kinds of different creatures and people. Like, we have a necromancer, we have a werewolf, we have an elf, and I just, again, I really enjoy these kinds of books where there's like a group of characters going on a quest. Although this group of characters is like, it is a little chaotic and there's a lot of big personalities and people have like their own things that they want to do, and it's like a whole situation. And this is a pretty action-packed book. Like, they get on the road and they like immediately get into trouble. So there is a lot of action in here, but I also felt like there was enough room in between to get to know the characters quite a bit, which I really enjoyed. I also really liked the world that we got to see in here. There are a lot of interesting aspects to it that I liked learning about. Now, the tone of this book is very particular, even though it is like, there's a lot of horror scenes and there's gore and violence and it's really brutal. It has like a snarky tone to it and like a snarky humor to it that I don't think everyone really likes, and there is a lot of it, so if you're not into it, you're really not going to be into it. But for some reason, I really ended up enjoying it in this one. I do think that it helped that I was in the mood for this when I read it though. Like, I think that helped me a lot, but I ended up really enjoying this one, even though it's absolutely like crazy. The next books I have are historical fiction with like varying degrees of fantasy. I don't know what's happened this year, but I've found a lot of these books that I've really enjoyed. And the first one is I gotta be honest, I think this is gonna be my favorite book of the year. It is my favorite book of the year that I've read so far. It's The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This book just really did it for me. It was the perfect blend of characters and plot, and the writing in particular I just thought was excellent. And it is quite descriptive, the writing, so if you don't like descriptive writing, you're not gonna like this because it is very descriptive. And it does slow the book down in a way, but I actually loved that. And just every single page of this was perfection, and I felt so sucked into this, and I just couldn't stop reading. The story goes back and forth a little bit with what timeline we're in, but it starts off with a young woman finding this mysterious and ancient book in her father's library, and when she asks him about it, he starts telling her the story of what the book is and how it's linked to this centuries long quest of trying to find out the truth about Vlad the Impaler, also known as Dracula. The story is quite twisty, and we get to see a lot of different settings in here. Istanbul, Budapest, France, like it takes us all over Europe, and I really enjoyed all of that and all of the descriptions of the different places. I also loved getting to know the characters and all of the different characters that we meet. We follow like several different ones, and I just really enjoyed it. There is also like obviously a big mystery in here, and I really enjoyed delving deeper into that and like slowly but surely like peeling away the layers of this whole thing. This isn't just a new favorite book of the year, it is one of my new all-time favorites. Like I really loved it that much, and in a way it almost feels like it was written for me because it just felt so perfect for me. It's not the kind of book that's going to suit every reader, just like actually one of my other all-time favorite books, The Secret History, also doesn't suit every reader, but there was like something about this and that book that it just appeals to me so much, and I just love it. I also can't wait to actually reread this book, which is really saying something because I don't reread a lot, and this is 700 pages, so it's a long book, but I'm already looking forward to reading it again. Then we have The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden, and this one took me a little bit by surprise actually. I was really excited to read this book because I've read some other books by this author that I really loved, and she came out with this and I was like, sure, I'll read it, I'll try it. And I thought that I would like it, but I wasn't prepared for how much I got sucked into this book and how much I like really cared about all of the people in it. The story is set during the First World War, where we meet this combat nurse who has been sent back to Canada because she was wounded, and she gets a message that her brother, who is fighting, has died in combat or died in the war. And there is something off about the message that she gets, and she just feels like she hasn't gotten the full story, and there are several things that are just off. So she decides that she's gonna go back into back to Europe, back into where the fighting is happening, to talk to the people who sent her that message and find out what actually happened. I feel like not knowing that much more than that is actually great if you're gonna read this book. Like, don't look too much into it, just go into it. But I will say there is like a fantastical ghostly element in here, and I really, really enjoyed that part. It was very interesting, and I really enjoyed what it represented in the war and like for the soldiers. Like, it's just interesting. I will say it isn't the most original story. Like, I'll be honest, it isn't. And you can sort of tell where it's going with certain kinds of things, except maybe the supernatural element actually. Like, that caught me by surprise. But otherwise, it might, like, if you've read a lot of these books, it might be similar to other books that you've read that are like this. But I don't know what it was. There was something about this that just really caught my attention, and there was something about the way the characters were written where I just really cared about them. And because of that, I just got really invested in the book. The next one is one that I read very recently actually. It's The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door by H.G. Parry. And again, this kind of feels like a book that was written for me because it has so many different elements to it that I just love in books. And it was just so good, and I couldn't put it down. The story starts off in 1920, where we meet our main character, who is a commoner. She has no connections and no magical blood, but she gets into a secret university where they study magic. She's definitely an outsider, but the reason that she wants to go to this school is because her brother was injured during the war in a Faerie attack where like a fairy came through a fairy door and like decimated all of these people and so many people died, but he survived. And he survived, but he's still cursed and he's really struggling with that curse. And so she wants to find a cure, which is very difficult because after the war, or actually after that attack, they sealed off all of the fairy doors and like you can't get there anymore, you can't summon fairies, and you're not allowed to study fairy magic anymore. So it's quite a challenge. After she gets to the school, though, she becomes friends with some other people there who are also interested in studying fairy magic for various reasons, and let's just say a lot of things happen. I love this kind of book where it has like a dark academia atmosphere, we're studying magic. I love these kinds of fairies where like they live in the fairy realm and sometimes they interact with humans, but they're like tricksters and you never really know what you're gonna get. And I also love books with groups of friends, and so this was just like the perfect mix for me. The story does shift a little bit halfway through where the pace changes quite a lot, but I actually really enjoyed that as well. And it was just so magical and this world was so interesting and it just felt like it was made for me. I liked this next one for some of the same reasons actually, because this also has fae and fairies in it. It's Wildwood Dancing by Juliet Marillier. This is set in Transylvania in, I'm pretty sure it's the 16th century, and we meet five sisters who live in a castle with their father. And they are very happy there. They're free, they can roam like the woods next to where they live, and they especially love the nights of the full moon because on the nights of the full moon they can go through a portal that they have found in the castle and enter the fairy realm, or the other kingdom as it's called in here, and they can spend a night dancing away with the fae creatures. We follow the second eldest daughter, and the story takes off when the father needs to go away for the winter for his health, and he leaves her basically in charge. And it seems like it's gonna be fine until her very meddling cousin, who lives in like the neighboring castle, comes in and he's been told that they should help if they need help, but he comes in and is basically thinking that he should be running everything because he's a man. So of course he's more qualified, and he is the most patronizing, condescending little gremlin. Like I have some serious beef with this guy. Like I wanted to hurl this book across the room every time he had dialogue. Like I just, oh, so annoying. This is a coming of age story though, so I understand that this cousin is like one of the things that makes the main character grow, but like, oh my god, this guy. Other than that though, I really enjoyed this book, and this like thing with cousin is actually a pretty big part of the story and you understand like why it's happening and everything, but I just thought this was magical. Also, things are also more complicated because the eldest sister like falls in love with someone from the other kingdom, which causes even more problems. But I really enjoyed it. I really loved reading about the main character, and I felt like this magical world was very enchanting, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Lastly, we have some more fantasy, but both of these books also has a romance element to it. And as you might know, I'm not the biggest romance reader, but occasionally I do come across some books where it's in there and it works for me, and it definitely worked for me in these two books. The first one is Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. Of course we have a book by this author on this list because I love this author and I read her books all the time, and I really enjoyed this one. It's set in a fantasy world where we meet a broken paladin and a master perfumer who sort of accidentally come together, and they end up witnessing an assassination attempt. And because they witness that, they try to like figure out what's going on with that and what that really means. I think one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this one is that even though this is a romance book, there is a lot of other stuff going on, and there's like other plot points that drive the story forward, and I enjoy when there's more than just the romance. that being said, I did really enjoy the romance in here. I really liked reading about the characters and them coming together, and they are very like cute, and it's just really nice, I think. And there is something about the way this author writes characters that always just gets me. Like, I always just love reading about them. It is perhaps a little bit of like a basic romance story. I read some reviews that said that, but I don't read a lot of these kinds of books, so I don't necessarily know what's basic and what's not. And to be honest, I don't know if I can deal with anything too crazy because it's just too much for me. So this is like the perfect thing for me where there's romance, but there's other things, and the romance isn't too complicated either in a way. Like, there are some complications, but it feels manageable and it's not like too much, I think. So I really enjoyed it. I'm also excited to read the next books in the series. There are 4 of them, and I'm pretty sure the second one follows like a side character that we meet in this book, and I'm intrigued to read about him, and I'm hoping that we get to learn a little bit more about this thing that happens in the book. There's like a really dark thing where something happens with some severed heads and it's like horrible, but I'm also very curious as to what that is, so I'm hoping we find that out in like the next books. But I'm really excited to keep reading these books, and I just love this author. I enjoy her books so much. Then at the very end we have The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. And I don't know what it is about this author and what she puts into her books, but whatever it is, I am so into it. I've read this book by her and Starling House, and I've given both 5 stars. And it is like, I don't give 5 stars to a lot of books, as you might know. And it's very rare that I find an author where I give multiple books 5 stars. So I don't know what it is about the writing in these books, but it really works for me. The story in here is a little complicated, and I do think that not knowing too much about this going into it is the best way to read it, so I'm not going to say too much. But it follows a former soldier, and not a great one at that, who is now a struggling scholar, who is obsessed with the tale and the legend of Una Everlasting. And she lived 1,000 years ago, and her stories are still a big part of this society. And through various events, he gets sent back in time to meet her, and he finds that this legend and the life of this person may not have been what he thought it was. That's all I kind of knew when I went into this, and I do think that that was a great way to go into it, because when I got to a certain point, there's this thing that happens and it caught me so off guard, and I just really enjoyed it, and the story took some directions that I really didn't see coming, and I think that that's a great way to go into this book. I was also really surprised by how much I was into the romance in here. Like, I don't even know if I knew that this was a romance book when I picked it up, so that also I found a little bit surprising, but I loved it, and I just loved the characters. And this is always the thing with reading romance for me, is that I need to care about the characters. I need to be interested in the characters in order to be interested in the romance. And it was just like the perfect storm for me. Again, there's just something about the way this author writes that just really works for me. I don't know if it's the characters or the atmosphere or what, but this book and Starling House, like, they are very different books. And so I'm actually surprised that I like both of them, or like love both of them this much. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I'm super excited to read more from this author, like, soon, because so far I've loved all of her books. Maybe we'll end up with like a favorites list with 2 of her books on it. I think she has another. I have one of her other books, and I think she's written one more. And yeah, I just really want to read all of them, so maybe most of my favorites list is going to be this author. I don't know. We'll see, but I really loved this one. It'll be interesting to see how similar this list is to my like favorite list at the end of the year. I don't know how much overlap there's gonna be, but some of these are definitely gonna make it into that list. But hopefully I will read so many amazing books for the rest of the year that I will have like a really hard time picking my favorites. Like, that's always the dream, but it'll be interesting to see. That was kind of it for today, though. I would love to know what your favorites of the year have been so far. Tell me all about it in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!